You know what sucks? Being fooled. Thinking that Nintendo is so awesome that you'd rush out to buy a Virtual Boy instead of waiting that extra year for the Nintendo 64 just to find out that the Virtual Boy sucks. Google it if you've never heard of it. It blew. What about being fooled by your love of Batman as a child? You looked so forward to the movie Batman and Robin just to find out that Batman's suit had nipples. Bat nipples. And then you gotta worry about the Wizards fans back in the day. Jordan going to the Wizards, coming out of retirement in 2001. All the fans fooled into thinking they had themselves the GOAT in a Wizards jersey. Didn't happen. It's easy to be fooled by things that should be great. Totally understand it. But over here, we're here to help. We have a few wide receivers that are being disregarded that on draft day you need to ask yourself, should I draft or pass? What is going on, Headliner Nation? Jake, Fantasy Headliners. Hopefully everybody is doing well out there. Today, talking a little bit draft or pass. Again, we already did a running back episode here of this topic. Now, time for some wide receivers. There's some older wide receivers that kind of being overlooked in drafts this year, but should they be? That's what we're going to discuss today. I got 3 wide receivers with a lot of information that you don't want to miss, so make sure you stick around for it. We're not going to take a whole lot of time. We're going to get into the list, but just a reminder, I'm a little bit later with my upload today. My apologies. Life gets in the way sometimes. Had to cut my hair. What I have left of it, got some Manscaped products back there, and just a reminder, they are going to be one of our official sponsors here of 2020. If you're looking for some amazing products that are hilarious to buy and some hilarious campaigns, go over to manscaped.com, use our promo code Headliners in all caps, and you're going to get 20% off your first order over there. So make sure, head over there, check it out. Make sure you're taking care of your boys here in the off season. It's still important, even though we're still partially quarantined. But now, let's head into some wide receivers that we need to decide, should we draft or pass here in 2020? The first name we're going to be talking about is going to be Keenan Allen, wide receiver of the Los Angeles Chargers. It's kind of crazy that Keenan Allen's name is really anywhere near this list, right? I mean, he's been one of the most consistent wide receivers over the last 3 years. In fact, over these last 3 years, he's averaged 148 targets, 101 receptions, just over 1,200 yards and 6 touchdowns a year. And he's still the team's number 1 target in the passing game. Yes, they have Mike Williams, but he's a little bit more big play dependent over volume. So why has Keenan Allen fallen so far? Well, it's because there's no Phillip Rivers there anymore, right? He's back in Indianapolis playing for the Colts. So who's going to be the quarterback for the Chargers here in 2020? Is it Tyrod Taylor or newly drafted rookie Justin Herbert? My next question really is, though, does it matter? I mean, sure, these 2 quarterbacks are different in so many ways, but it's not like all of a sudden they're not going to use the best wide receiver on their team. Could Keenan Allen see a decrease in targets this season? Abso-freaking-lutely, I'm sure he will. But what does he still need to get to have that value that we're used to seeing? Well, over his career, he's averaged just around 12 yards per reception. So if you're looking for another, 1,000-yard season right around that 5 touchdown mark, he's going to have to get close to 83 receptions here in 2020, which means he needs to see around 120 targets because no wide receiver catches every target thrown their way. Now, Chargers head coach Anthony Lynn, he was the head coach / OC in Buffalo back in 2016. You want to guess who his quarterback was? Yeah, you guessed it. It's Tyrod Taylor. Now that year, the Bills finished ranked 32nd in pass attempts. Only 32 teams, so that's dead last. And then also ranked 30th in passing yards. No wide receiver on that Bills team had more than 76 targets. However, it is worth noting, though, that neither Robert Woods, Marquise Goodwin, or Sammy Watkins played in all 16 games that season. But in his career as a starter, Tyrod hasn't had a wide receiver with more than 96 targets on the year. That was Sammy Watkins in 2015. Now, he did have 96 targets over only playing 13 games. Had he played all 16, he was on pace for 118. So really, if it's Tyrod, we're asking him to do something that he never has in his career. Herbert, on the other hand, they're going to run the ball less, right? He's there with the big arm, and he's there to throw the football. The last 2 seasons at Oregon, he had over 400 pass attempts and 29 touchdowns in each season. How long does it really take for the Herbert takeover? We know it's going to happen at some point. But with this offseason, how much does that really put him behind the 8 ball? In my opinion, not very long, right? Similar to when Tyrod was in Cleveland, and so was Baker Mayfield. By week 6 or so, this could be the Justin Herbert, show in Los Angeles. Right now, Keenan Allen, he's currently ranked wide receiver 19 with an ADP of 45, right there, right around the 4th or 5th round. A great value, but there's still a lot of unknowns. But as a wide receiver 2 on your team, I don't know if you can pass it up. We are all on board with heavy running back early this year if you have the chance. And if you do, you're going to be looking for some solid wide receivers right around this same time of your draft. So if you're asking me, do I draft or pass on Keenan Allen this year? I draft. So we just mentioned that Phillip Rivers has gone to the Indianapolis Colts, so why not talk about T.Y. Hilton now of the Indianapolis Colts? So everything we basically just talked about with Keenan Allen and his past production and consistency, well, that now becomes T.Y. Hilton. Now, he's missed 8 games over his last 2 years, and the departure of Andrew Luck has really hurt his overall stock, but I'll be honest, I hope people stay worried because he could be an absolute steal here in 2020. When this guy plays, he produces. In every season that he has played at least 14 games, which is 6 out of the last 8 years, he's averaged 131 targets, 76 receptions, 1,200 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Now, his injury concerns that he was dealing with in 2019 should be gone coming into 2020. He should be fully healthy. And don't just assume because people want to be lazy out there and tell you that Phillip Rivers is washed up, that he really is, because he's not. He hasn't missed a game since he's been named the starter in 2006. He's thrown for at least 4,000 yards in 11 out of the last 12 seasons, but last year, his stock took a drop as well. Had 23 passing touchdowns, but also had 20 interceptions in 2019, and that's what really led people to believe that his time had come to an end and that his arm was gone. But if you dig a little bit deeper, look at the picks he threw. They really paint a different picture. He was constantly playing from behind and having to make things happen in the fourth quarter of ball games. 8 of his interceptions came in the fourth quarter while the Chargers were trailing. 6 of them were in the final 2 minutes of the game, which also the Chargers were losing. He was constantly playing from behind and trying to force the ball down the field. Now, the team that he's on now in Indianapolis with the Colts, they're built to win and win now. Overall, a lot better team. So I'm not quick to say that Rivers is done and that he can't make T.Y. Hilton a top fantasy asset. In fact, not only is this probably the best offensive line that he's been behind in his career, now he may not have to worry about a lot of fourth quarter, deficits for him to overcome. Maybe by the fourth quarter this year, they're relying on the running game a little bit more. So, like I said, I'm not quick to write off Phillip Rivers. Give me Rivers over Brissett any day when it comes to possible fantasy production for wide receivers. Now, T.Y. won't be alone in the passing game. Newly drafted Michael Pittman and second-year wide receiver Paris Campbell are there also, which we have some pretty good expectations for. If Pittman can produce anything, that will just keep even more attention away from T.Y. Hilton, which will only help. T.Y. may not be a huge threat in the red zone, but he never really has been. And right now, he's currently wide receiver 21 with an ADP of 53, so he's all the way into the 5th round. If you go running back heavy early in drafts, T.Y. Hilton is a great option, especially at the price that you can get him. This one, for me, it's easy. If I'm there on draft day having to decide to draft or pass T.Y. Hilton, I draft. Last guy we're talking about is going to be A.J. Green. Don't shut the video off yet. I know what your initial thoughts are of A.J. Green, but just hear me out here for a minute, and let's see if A.J. Green is one of these guys that we should draft or pass in 2020. Speaking of healthy, what about A.J. Green? Well, I hope you could sense the sarcasm there because I was laying it on pretty thick. After missing 7 games in 2018 and all of the 2019 season, people have all but had it with A.J. Green at this point, right? Sure, the guy is one of the best wide receivers in all of the NFL when he plays, but when's he going to play? At least his price is cheaper this year, right? Which is absolutely great. Cincinnati franchise tagged him for the 2020 season, so he's playing for that next contract. We know they've added Joe Burrow. He's the new franchise quarterback in town. Their offensive line is improved. That's only going to give Joe Burrow more time to go through his progressions. They should have a solid running game to keep the defenses honest with Joe Mixon, and they have plenty of pass-catching weapons to keep defensive attention off of A.J. Green. They got Tyler Boyd, newly drafted T. Higgins, John Ross. All signs are pointing to Green being successful this year if he can stay healthy. Now, 2 months ago here on the channel, we had our doctor, Dr. Ethan Turner, was on the show, and we talked about A.J. Green, and going into 2020, Dr. Turner doesn't really see a whole lot of limitations. We expect him to be fully healthy to start the year. Now, he will be 32 years old at the start of the season, and he may not be what he once was. He's basically football old at this point, but you can also say that he's fresh and hasn't been overworked over the past couple years. Last year, the Bengals had the 6th most pass attempts in the NFL, and do we really see that changing this year? Not really. I mean, they may be improved, but they're still going to be trailing a lot or competing at least late in games all year long. So what does that mean? It's going to mean a continued 4-quarter passing attack. They're going to have to throw the ball all game every week. Add in the fact that they play 6 division games against potential high-powered offenses like the Ravens, the Steelers, the Browns, only means they could be throwing more and more. A.J. Green is a risk, but I don't need to remind you what he can do. We've all talked about him for years upon years. It's all about risk versus reward. Right now, he's wide receiver 28 with an ADP of 65, all the way into the 6th round. Last year, wide receiver 28 scored 161 points. That's roughly 70 receptions, 900 yards, and 6 touchdowns. So do those numbers sound attainable to really return that value? I mean, every season that he's played at least 10 games, he's definitely gotten those numbers. So the ultimate question here is, does A.J. Green play 10 games? Should I draft him? And in my opinion, I do think that he plays those 10 games. Is he going to play all 16? No, more than likely he won't. But he shouldn't be your wide receiver 1 now, kind of like he was in years past. It's a lot better value. He could be your wide receiver 3 this year. If he falls to the 6th round, maybe you go 2 running backs, a tight end, and 2 wide receivers, and then all of a sudden you're sitting there staring at A.J. Green. He becomes a lot better value, and the risk, it's shrunk a little bit. So really look at your overall roster, because right now, the way things sit, do I draft or pass A.J. Green? I draft. All right, so those are 3 veteran wide receivers that a lot of people have a lot of questions about. That's why they've fallen so far in fantasy football drafts here in 2020. Now, let me know what you think down below in the comment section. Are you interested in any of these 3? I know probably at some point they've burned you. Maybe not Keenan Allen as much as T.Y. or A.J., but these guys have some value going into 2020, and the most important thing is value. And where they're at in drafts, 4th, 5th, 6th round, these guys could really help your fantasy football teams here if you decide to go heavy running back early. But like always, we want to stay interactive. So I want to get your opinion down below in the comment section. Make sure you hit that like button. And if you enjoyed the content, consider subscribing, because myself, Kyle, Chris, we got all kinds of content coming here in the offseason leading up to the 2020 season. We're super excited about it. Looking forward to it. So make sure you guys have a great rest of your day, a great weekend, and we'll talk to you later.